in the course of 3 months, ending up being permanently in a wheelchair. 4 to 6 months, lost the ability to use my arms. 9 months after, I lost the ability to talk to people, and that was the most difficult. I used an iPad and I typed with my nose.
What did you fight the most, I guess, in those initial stages?
Where is this going to end? And you don't know. You are there's 20 cases globally that could be related to you. To highlight that you're a genetic anomaly, adverse, and super small and rare. You have doctors, you have nurses telling you, you can have a really good life in a wheelchair. And you just look at them and you're like, well, I can also have a really good life if I get out of the wheelchair. This last October on Halloween, I took my first step in over 12 years. Maybe it's just who I am. Part 2 is, okay, what's next?
We just finished shooting this episode of Beyond the Markets, where we explore something far more valuable than the next stock pick, the currency of human resilience. My guest, Rylan Laplante, embodies what he calls and refers to as delusional optimism, believing in goals so ambitious that others consider them impossible. His story fundamentally changed how I view potential in my own life. Now, at age 11, a rare genetic anomaly left Rylan hospitalized for years. He lost his ability to walk, to use his hands, and eventually even his speech. For 12 years, medical professionals told him he would never walk again. But last October, Rylan took his first steps. Now, just months later, he's preparing to walk the Calgary Marathon's 10-kilometer while fundraising for the hospital that supported him in his journey. This isn't about investment strategies. It's about the power to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles through unwavering belief and determination. I'm Trevor Glon, and this conversation might just redefine what you believe is possible. If you had to describe your journey, which we'll get into, in just 2 words, how would you do so?
Say delusional optimism.
And it's interesting because I've heard you say that before, and the first time that you said it, it really struck me as fascinating because there's kind of the negative and the positive baked into one statement. What exactly do you mean by delusional optimism?
I would say that you have to be so far outside the normal consensus that people are going to think that, this person's a little bit delusional, like they have a far off goal, a far off dream, or majority of people are going to be like, wow, that's not really achievable. But you also have to be optimistic personally, inward, to believe that you can go out and achieve that. So when I say you're delusionally optimistic or delusional optimism, you have to go out and actually have enough belief in your own goals that might seem absurdly crazy to everybody else, but you have to be optimistic enough to go out and achieve that.
And it's interesting, we've started talking about this concept of delusional optimism, but because we haven't gotten into your story, people are probably wondering why we're talking about your journey with using those 2 words. So to kind of take things all the way to the back, or to the front, I guess, before everything started. Take me back to your childhood before everything changed. Who was 9-year-old Rylan?
Sure. So growing up, been very fortunate where I had a lot of opportunities. I skied, 20, 30 days a year. I played professional, competitive sports growing up with the route of going into, the goal of being a professional soccer player. School came very easily for me, so I could spend a lot of time on the extracurriculars. I just loved spending time with my friends, building snow forts, tobogganing, skiing. I was a very active kid.
Yeah. So obviously Alberta presents a lot of those opportunities, and you as a young budding kid were taking advantage of them as much as you could. Now, life often has a way of presenting unexpected chapters. Can you share with us if and when your journey took a bit of a turn and what that new direction looked like?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll bring you back. It was spring of the year I was 11. Discovered I had a rare genetic anomaly, and that ended up putting me into the Children's Hospital here in Calgary for over 3 years. And a lot of that was a very difficult time of my life because things aren't going the way you hoped, and you're on the downward spiral.
So obviously discovering that and then spending that amount of time in a hospital, obviously that's an incredible pivot point in your life. when you were going through that, how did your perspective begin to evolve during, I guess, the initial days and weeks as you were adjusting to what was effectively your kind of new normal for a period of time?
It was difficult. You ask a lot of questions of like, is it just chance? Why you? Give you background. Again, played competitive sports, skied a ton growing up. Was very thankful to have that ability to do so. And then, in the course of 3 months, ending up being permanently in a wheelchair. And then fast forward another 4 to 6 months, lost the ability to use my arms, all the way to within about a year, I couldn't talk. So, that journey of struggle of, questioning a little bit of why you, and then, you're also a kid at that time of, you don't really understand the world as whole much. You just know that your world's falling apart and things aren't going the best for you. But, eventually what I found in life is you do hit the bottom.
Yeah.
As much as the journey feels like it's going to last forever.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can slowly start making your climb back.
Right. So did you have like complete certainty as to how drastically things had changed, or was it something that was there still possibilities that this could be a shorter time frame than the 3 years, or did you know kind of right out of the gate how serious it was and how long of a, I guess, journey or battle it was going to become for you to go from where you were to where you are today?
No idea, transparently. So, roll into the hospital, try to slow down, the effects that are happening, the side effects, through physiotherapy, keep moving, move it or you lose it was a lot of the conversations that I got from medical professionals. And then as time went on, it just slowly, lost more mobility and, didn't really know where the end was. And was there a plateau where that's the new norm? But it was a slow, gradual decline for give or take about 15 months.
And so when you were, again, at that, I'll call it initial pivot, but that initial pivot could have been, a pretty substantial period of time, whether it was 3 months or 6 months. Was the battle as much mental and psychological as it was physical, or was it a balance of both, or what did you fight the most, I guess, in those initial stages? Or grapple with, I would say.
I'd say the grappling with or the struggle came from more the mental side, because you had to realize that the aspirations and dreams you've had, as a kid were slowly slipping away from your fingers. And again, didn't grow up in Calgary, had ties to Calgary, but, your friend group's Red Deer, they're all having summer, they're trying out, they made the provincial team, they're going out down east to go play, soccer against the rest of the provinces. And, they're giving you phone calls and that, but you're stuck in a hospital bed. So I think it was the medical side that was like the mental side that you had to really fight against from like a battle perspective or grappling. And then you also didn't know where the end point is. I think that is the hardest side of anything in life, is the unknown, is where is this going to end? And you don't know.
And so was there kind of people talk about the phases of going through something that's difficult, kind of the denial and then the acceptance and all that. Was it kind of through that initial phase a bit of a decline before you kind of hit that bottom, and then we're like, okay, this is something that I can positively work my way out of? Or like, you hear a lot of stories about remarkable recoveries and don't necessarily appreciate the dedication that goes into behind them, but maybe share some insights about the treatments, therapies that have been a part of the journey, taking you from where you were to where you are now.
Sure. I think it comes down to trust, like nothing else in life with everybody, trust in people. So, during this journey, lots of things are changing, losing a lot of abilities. There was a specific doctor that was honest, and everybody else was more like, hey, let's try this, it'll make you better. Let's try this, we'll make you better. And it was selling, the false hoods in a little bit that as a kid, you're like, oh, I'll take this and it'll make you better. And then when it didn't, you start losing a little bit of trust in the medical system per se. But there was one doctor that was transparent. He was like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where you're going to end up. But if you're willing to work with me, I will sit down and spend the extra 3 to 5 minutes to explain what my rationale behind this is. And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but, push that forward. So I would say the most important thing that I've learned from like a treatment side is complete trust and building that trust with people.
Right. You mentioned something important, somebody that you trust in the process, a physician who was candid with you. I want to go back to, I guess, the facility and the people that were there as your kind of support group. But before I do, just to make sure that everybody's kind of understanding the setting here, you have a genetic anomaly, and effectively you're in the hospital for 3 years. And at that point, are you completely bedridden, or is it a combination of, declining functionality or?
Within 6 months, I was bedridden.
Okay.
Lost the ability to use my hands, so I couldn't feed myself. Right. And then, fast forward until like 9 months after, I lost the ability to talk to people, and that was the most difficult. I used an iPad and I typed with my nose. I was very thankful that Apple existed at that time. And it was a very difficult 6-ish months of my life.
Wow. I mean, not shockingly, that's why we started off this discussion with talking about, the currency of human resilience. I mean, to converse with your nose on an iPad speaks incredibly highly to that. Okay, so that kind of, I guess, laid the groundwork just so everybody's fully understanding the gravity of what the situation was like for you. Talk to me a little bit about the facility that you were in, whether it's the department, maybe the support people, or those who were essential or critical in, I guess, helping you navigate the early stages, but then eventually start making some progress coming out of this.
So I'd say first and foremost, the Alberta Children's Hospital here in Calgary is world-renowned. I've been fortunate to go to medical treatment in the U.S. along the 12-year journey I've been on, and it's truly a remarkable facility, and the people in there do amazing work. Even though a lot of the children are in very difficult situations, they make the life for the parents, the families, and the patients the best they physically can. So for me, one specific area is the Riddell Pain Clinic. During this whole journey, there was significant pain associated with it. No different than, let's say you take it's a snowy afternoon or weekend in Alberta and you sit on the couch too long and you get up and you're stiff, amplify that exponentially because I couldn't move at that time. Right. So there was a very critical point where one of the nurses actually referred me to this pain clinic. And that's where I met that doctor who was, hey, we're just going to work with you, and was very candid to say, I don't know what's going to help you, but if you work with me, we can try to make your life the best it can where you are right now.
Yeah. And then I guess in terms of those closely connected to you, family members and friends and stuff like that, was it as much a shock to them in terms of what you were going through? And I mean, obviously you're the one who was having to deal with this all, but I suspect that maybe they were having similar mental battles as well, just trying to wrap their heads around what that new normal looked like from your perspective.
For sure. I would say once you remove yourself from your hometown a little bit, a lot of those friendships that I had as a kid kind of ran its course, right? Like you play on the same sports team with them, you go to the same school with them, you're all relatively young. And when you relocate, and this was before most social media and the ease of communications were as high as they were today, a lot of that side dropped off, and you'd get like birthday card or a letter at Christmas, that type of stuff. I think the struggles was more on the family side. There was a lot of complications around, my parents were with me majority of the nights in the hospital. And I don't know if for the people on the podcast that have stayed in a hospital, as a patient, it's not great, but also the accommodations for everybody else isn't great as well. There's usually a chair, or you might get like a pillow and a little bench. Yeah. So I would say my parents went through a significant amount of sleepless or sleep interrupted nights. Right. And, also you don't know what's going on with your kid, right? Mm-hmm. So what's going to happen? How far do I regress into what state? And then how do you build back from that, right? Like what's the next steps? And there's a lot of unknown around there. Yeah. So I think there was a lot of stress from a family perspective on that. And I was really thankful that both my older siblings were based in Calgary at that time. So there was already a support network in that sense. My brother already had a place down here. So it was pretty easy to move in to his place for a temporary side before we figured out how long this was actually going to be and, permanently move into Calgary.
Gotcha. Now, in terms of, I guess, the medical aspect of the journey, maybe just touch on some of the treatments, or have you had surgeries and how many? And I don't know if you've kind of kept track of that over time, but what does that look like through the whole, progress and situation?
For sure. I'd say the number one thing is I've had countless amount of mini procedures. I call them day procedures, where you go in, either get local anesthetic or you go to sleep for 90 minutes. And then that happens. The major ones I've had in my life were coming out of high school, when I guess the effects of my genetic anomaly kind of ran its course, and I could work through rehab to get back, what I lost. But I was stuck in a position where my legs couldn't straighten. So the major surgery that I've had was over a year, where they actually put me in almost like an external fixator, they call it. But you ever see a Hollywood movie where a guy breaks his hand and he has a bunch of pins in it? Now imagine that over the course of the entire leg. And I had that for a year. And that was, a part where it was, hey, we're going to strain your leg. And then ideally you can get back up on your feet and walk. And for me, at that point, I was in a chair for over 6 years. That was a big, big goal of mine.
Yeah. Now I'm going to, at the risk of, kind of spoiling the progress or how far you've come, there was a bit of a, I guess I'll call it an aha moment for me. And that was, we were attending the same dinner party. And the last time I had seen you prior to that, and I think I'd probably known you for a little bit over a year leading up to that. And I knew that you were spending your days effectively in a wheelchair leading up to then. We had spent some time together. Coming over for this dinner party, I kind of expected to see you, but see you in the same, form. And incredibly for me, we pull up and we get to the front door, and you're standing there vertical, and you're asking if you can take our coats. And I was like, well, hold on a second. Can I hug you first? It was kind of my initial reaction, because it was just so remarkable to me, having seen where you were before, and then all of a sudden you had made all this progress. So now I'm curious what the rehabilitation process has looked like to get you from what you were talking about before, effectively being bedridden for as long as you were, to not only standing, but we're going to get into something else that you're doing very shortly. I'm curious about the consistent work that's gone into allowing you to make this progress, because I can only imagine what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first part is, amazing team that I've worked with, both at the Children's Hospital, and then eventually, once you get to a certain point, entering into the adult side, the care of the workers have been incredible. Now, for myself, the key for it was, not skipping the hard work. There's stuff in all of our lives, but a lot of it was painful. You didn't want to do it, or it's mindless. So an example would be, I couldn't use my hands at one point. So a large part would be going back to elementary and writing out the alphabet, and just writing that out until you build up, the endurance to actually write. And that was a big, small tactile function that I needed to gain. Now, I was 16 years old. Did I really want to sit at a table and write A, B, C, D for a half an hour? No, but sometimes you have to do that, menial, mindless type of activities to really gain and improve.
Yeah. Well, it's a good point, because even in everyday life or our professional skills, I think something can be gleaned or learned from revisiting the fundamentals and focusing on the fundamentals. Now, fully admittedly, for you to be doing that presumably day after day from a rehabilitation perspective is a completely different thing. But we kind of mentioned this delusional optimism before, and I suspect that's part of hanging on to that emotion of, I can do this. Being delusionally optimistic is kind of what kept you going. But maybe touch on through the good times and bad, the successes and some of the stumbles, what is it that kept you moving, like day after day after day, knowing that you just had to, as you mentioned, stay consistent and stay committed in order to make that progress?
I would say that it was the belief in being able to achieve anything. Right. I think I'd have to focus back on early childhood on that one. I was very fortunate to, I'll draw upon my father on that one. You know, he told me, it was like, hey, go out, work hard, and you can go out and achieve what you want. Now, I didn't really realize what that would mean, down the line, but I really held on to that, through the medical professionals that were like, no, you're probably not going to walk, or no, we wouldn't see you recovering from this, or you have a pretty good life. Let's just figure out how to make it the best you can where you're at.
Yeah.
And
kind of setting boundaries for you, or confining
me into a space that was, understandable from their perspective, right? From a factual perspective, they were correct. But for me, it was always this disbelief of, if I keep just pushing, let's see what happens. And I also have to thank the support network that I've had, especially family and medical professionals, where they're willing to roll the dice and allow me to push myself in order to achieve where I am today.
I want to try to, that's fascinating. Thanks for sharing that. I want to try and dig up if there were any specific moments. One, you mentioned people kind of confining you. And obviously you don't have to call out names or anything like that, but do you remember any moments where somebody was like, I just don't think you're going to be able to do this or that? Do you remember those moments and kind of the motivation that it sparked for you? And then secondly, after it had sparked the motivation, do you remember those moments where you were like, oh my God, I'm making remarkable progress, or this is something that maybe, as much as I held on to that delusional optimism, I didn't know if I was going to do this again. Can you kind of try to remember moments on both sides, the confiners, if you will, and then those, I guess, remarkable breakthroughs through your process?
For sure. I'd say in the children's hospital side of things, they keep it more lighthearted and positive. Right. So there's less, I guess, hard answers to know. Mm-hmm. It was more quick glances at each other, and who had the better bedside manner would kind of have that conversation. I'd say the one that I remember the most is when I was in the adult system, and I was sat down by a medical kind of clerk, a nurse, and a doctor, and they were like, you're an adult now. This is where you're at in life. These are the programs that kind of exist. Let's make your life the best it can. And they spun it as almost a positive route where it's like, there's like accessible housing that you can live in. You can go to university. There's places that would, you can go work for and all that. And that was kind of like the reality was starting to hit a little bit, where I was like, all right, I gotta really buckle down to try as much as I can, because this is where I'm at, and this is where society and the current factual state says I'm at.
Right. Those sound like a lot of they're providing you with acceptance statements, yes. Almost like this is what you need to accept. And it seems as though you were still living in this world where statistically maybe you're right, but I'm still.
And that's where the delusional optimism comes in. It's like you have doctors, you have nurses telling you, you can have a really good life in a wheelchair. Yeah. And you just look at them and you're like, well, I could also have a really good life if I get out of the wheelchair.
Which, to be fair, isn't wrong. Yeah. I think there's a lot of people who have come to that reality, and they continue to battle through it. But again, for your journey, you were holding on to, there's potentially something more that I can dig out of myself.
For sure. Right? And again, I don't necessarily know where that belief came from. Mm-hmm. Maybe, again, it was just straight delusion of grandeur, where it's some far off belief that I'm going to do this, and I'm going to try to figure out any possible way how. And I was fortunate to find a really great medical team in the adult side as well, where they were willing to push that limit with me. And, a lot of it was
they bought into your optimism.
Bought into the optimism, and I would propose ideas to them, And they would be, hey, if there's medical grounding and it's safe to do, why don't we roll the dice? Like, let's see what happens. So, and then part two, I would say for me, is what do you say the big moments for me was this last October on Halloween. I took my first step in over 12 years.
Wow.
And that was a big moment in my mind to be like, wow, all the
So that's incredible. In 12 years, you took your first step. Like, what did that feel like?
it was.
Can you even put it into words?
It's hard to describe
Yeah.
that. It's, a significant amount of, work, setbacks, momentum building forward, more setbacks. It's never a linear path. And eventually taking those first steps, it was like, wow, like it actually came to fruition. And then maybe it's just who I am. Part two is, okay, what's next?
What's next? Yeah. How many of these can I string together?
Yes. And it was like, all right, sweet. Now I can take a step. Let's try to walk around like where I was at was a square. I was like, okay, let's walk the hallway. Now can I walk outside? Can I do a lap around the block? And it was kind of like that, what's next in my mind.
And so you're mentioning these mini milestones, I think,
Yeah.
after that first step. Like, maybe just unpack it for me. Are these walking the squares, walking in the hallway, walking outside? Is that over the course of a week, a month, 3 months?
It was about a month. Like once you have, no different than the very beginning, if you get momentum one way or the other, it's amazing how quick your life can change. And, in the beginning, it was kind of a downward momentum and I lost a lot. And then there was a plateau for, I don't know, call it 10 years. And then I had a big breakthrough. And now there's a lot of upward momentum towards achieving goals and pushing that limit to see where I can actually end up and where I'm going.
So it almost, like at the risk of maybe putting out too much of a platitude, but like there was a moment of inertia where that first step kind of really kicked things into gear for you, where it's like, okay, this is just the first step, and there's so much more beyond this.
Yeah, and I'd back it up a little bit and say, I was in Canada and there was a good 2.5 years of rehab without showing a whole lot of promise. A little bit of strength, a little bit of extra mobility, but this last fall, I rolled the dice and I moved to the US for about 2.5 months. They had a procedure down there, moved to a foreign country, place I've actually never been to. And there was a lot of risk associated with that and unknown. And no matter where you go in life, the unknown's never a fun place to be, but sometimes it's necessary to go to where you want to go, or where you see your goals going.
Do you feel like a different environment added an element of like the motivation for you, or was it helpful to be in a different unknown place, I guess?
I think it's where fire hit the brimstone almost for me. It was like, this is my one shot. I'm going to make it the best I can. Because leading up to that, we tried a significant amount of, different mini experiments here in Canada. And my doctor in Canada recommended this in the US as saying like, hey, this is kind of your best likelihood and best shot to get back up on your feet. And, for me, I'm a student. I was working as an internship and I was like, wow, I'm going to put my life on hold. And that momentum career-wise to try to go for this was a battle that I had to figure out. And there was days that I contemplated a lot of time, either just staring in the mirror or I'm a guy that likes to go out to nature and, think things through. So, there was about a week and a half there where I contemplated a lot and eventually, said, okay, I'm all in. And just put that mindset and jump with both feet of saying, this is the best shot I got. Let's go all in.
Now, I do want to get into reactions because I think talking about reactions will be interesting. Before I do, though, that first step moment, I don't want to walk past that entirely. Were there other moments similar to that one in the aftermath where you were like, okay, this is another milestone of progress from that October point forward to now?
I would say because I was in the US, not around family, the first step almost happened in a slight isolation. I have a video of it because fortunately the therapists that I was working with were like, you should probably record this.
Yeah.
Again,
Fair point.
I'm a young guy that was like, yeah, whatever, take the first step and, let's keep going and excited on that end. Yeah. But I'd say the big one was when I came home, grandparents, and being able to walk up their stairs at their front door and knock on the door, and they opened it and were shocked because I didn't actually tell them I was coming over. Yeah. And then from a personal goal perspective,
what was their reaction specifically? Because I can only
there was a few tears.
Yeah.
My grandfather, first generation immigrant from Eastern Europe, doesn't really show any emotion, more of the strong mentality. That was one of the first times in my life I actually saw the guy cry. Yeah. And that just spoke volumes to how much that meant to them. And they were there along a lot of my journey as well, to be there to support in the ways that they could.
I don't want to entirely walk past that. Were there other moments after that fact where you were like, okay, this is another milestone I'm making? That first step was incredible, but now I'm making even more progress.
So my buddies and I kind of came up with an idea or philosophy. It's called doing everything for the second time. Right. So growing up, I had opportunities to, example, like swing a golf club, go in the swimming pool and swim, go on a hike, that type of stuff. So I call it doing things for the second time, rather than most people like, oh, it's my first time doing this. So in the last, call it 3 months, I, swam in the pool, hopped in a river. I went out to launch pad with some of my friends and actually started...
Launch pad being
a driving range, and started swinging a golf club with, some of my buddies. Yeah. And again, I hadn't done that since I was a very young kid. So those moments, are very memorable for me, because getting out there and, regaining arguably what I lost since I was a kid.
Now, is there, because we talked about Rylan at 9 years old, is there something that you've missed incredibly, and is there something that you've been able to do for the second time that's been a little sweeter than the rest, I guess?
So far, I would say being able to hit a golf ball and hear that perfect
sound.
Ting.
Yeah.
That was something I missed. I have a long way to go. I'm not perfectly steady on my feet yet, but that was something, like having that. Fast forward to this next winter, getting back on skis. That the feeling I've never actually lost is, a fresh powder day. I'm gonna sound like a true Albertan here, but being almost weightless in snow is something that you just don't forget. And I think those are the things that I held on to that might have kept me going, is those delusional beliefs to keep pushing, of those emotional feelings of, feeling weightless in snow when you ski. Another one would be like a surfboard, catching a wave and being able to, effortlessly go on top and get pushed forward. Those are the type of things that, kept pushing me.
Now, speaking of surfboard,
it's
May in Calgary, we're going to talk about a specific challenge that you've set yourself, but I want to leave that aside just for now. Okay. Summer's coming up. You mentioned surfing. Do you have any do something for the second times on your list for this summer?
Absolutely. So I want to go play 18 holes of golf and hopefully not lose an entire sleeve of golf balls. I want to go.
So some of us who have golfed within the last 12 years still do that. So even if you did, it wouldn't be that bad.
Fair enough. Yeah. And then part two, I've want to get back into more water sports side of things. So one of the things that, you got to work with your medical team to be within a safety boundary. So wake surfing was discussed and was open to, because the slow speed wasn't that adversely unsafe. So that's something I want to do by the end of the summer as well, is get back up and be able to, feel that weightless spot. For people that haven't done it, for people that have, there's a perfect balance where you can, once you hit the range or the area in the wave, that it's truly magical.
When you're in the when you get in the pocket,
Right
you
in
just
the
kind of
pocket.
feel it.
Yeah.
This is where I'm supposed to be. I want to touch on something. You mentioned your team and then kind of having these conversations. What are those conversations like when you're thinking about, I'm going to, doing things for the second time? Is it kind of comical? Do you kind of get like hard no as a response sometimes? Do you kind of get, let's chat about that? What are those conversations like with your team?
I would say that most things they're willing to work with me on, as long as it's within like a safety range. It's not going to set me back indefinitely.
Yeah.
I would say that I'm very fortunate to have a team that's willing to, work within a boundary. And they also realize that it's a motivating point, right? It's like, what drives somebody to get up at 5:30 and do stuff that's not the most fun for both physical and a mental perspective? It's the small things that you can gain along the way, or the small milestones. And they're willing
Not to dip into psychology, but if I could for a second, would it be more motivating for you if they said, no, you can't do that? Or if they said, yeah, let's work towards that? What would you find more motivating?
I would say that earlier me, a little more stubborn, would have been more of the, I'll show you if you say no. But as I started to get more trust in this team, a lot of them, it's a two-way street and they're willing to work with me. The word no is not really in the vocabulary with them. It's more of a, you can do this, but here's the
risk management.
Risk management side of things. So for me, it's more of a open dialogue, open conversation. And, maybe I'm not doing it in the month of May, but, why don't we look at it in August or September? It might be the conversation because, you need treatments, you need a little more muscle, type of that, like that along those lines. So it's more of an open dialogue.
Gotcha. All right, now let's dive into a new challenge that you've set for yourself. It's May in Calgary, like I mentioned. Calgary Marathon is something that happens in May in Calgary. You have set upon yourself to walk the 10 kilometer. And that's just another, I guess, example of the way that your story continues to evolve. When did you get this idea? What inspired you to do this? Doing a marathon, whether it's a 5K, 10K, half, or full, is ambitious by anybody's standards. But how did this seed get planted? And how did you decide, this is something I'm going to go ahead and do? Well, first off, let's start about what exactly are you doing?
So on May 24th, I'm walking the 10-kilometer walk and run at the Calgary Marathon. For myself, selfishly, it gave me a target on the wall. It gave me a mark to try to chase. From a rehab perspective, I found it's incredibly important to have, 1 to 2 week goals, but then also have that quarterly or half year goal to really, aim for and really push yourself. Because if you don't have something that is a really far off, almost quote unquote unachievable, then it's not going to motivate you to push those early mornings or those late evenings. Now, fast forward a little bit, where did the seed get planted, or how did I come up with this? This last Christmas, I came back to Canada. I was in the southern U.S., so it was a rough change. That was the first time I didn't feel like I was Canadian. I was down in Texas.
Just the body readjusting
to temperature, winter. Yeah, like I came back the second week in December, and it was cold. We had a cold snap. I still remember -20. That was the coldest -20 I've ever felt in my life. And I grew up here, and I was like, yeah, maybe I should go back to the U.S. right now. Fast forward a little bit. I didn't know how long I was going to be in Texas. So there was a couple discussions. Family already booked a vacation for Christmas time. And I came back to Canada, and I was full transition into full rehab. And rehab is 5-6 days a week. And I'm pushing. And I'm like, I take a 2-week vacation right now. That kind of messes up momentum and messes up a lot of the other rehab side of things that I'm really trying to push for me, right?
That commitment and consistency you talked about before just doesn't go away, right?
Yeah. So, I was in Calgary. I'm old enough hanging out at home, and I did physio on Christmas Eve, physio on Boxing Day, but Christmas I had off. And, I'm very fortunate to have great neighbors where I live. So the neighbor came over, and I'm very fortunate. I view them as almost like another set of grandparents in a sense. They're like, why don't you come on over, have a conversation with us? Like, no one should be, alone at that time of the year. Yeah. And I think it was then that, that was the first time I seen them, that I walked over to their place. And
so they didn't know prior to that you were.
Well, they did know that I was walking, but it was the first time they ever seen me visibly. It was like, yeah, no, my dad was like, yeah, the U.S. went really well. Rylan's made a lot of gains. That's the type of stuff that he would tell people, and roll forward into the U.S. side of things, like coming back. A lot of people were shocked, no different than I think yourself when you saw me at the door. Yeah. And I went over there. They were having a conversation. They're like, you have an opportunity here to, talk about this, share your story, and it might resonate with people that are going through a hard time, and, be able to share to be like, hey, you can get through this. And I'm a very private person traditionally, kind of stay in my lane, let your work speak for itself. Don't go out and tell people a whole lot of stuff. And I sat there and I was like, oh, okay, whatever. Like that's where the seed got planted. Fast forward about 2 months, rehab's going really well. Yeah. And I sat down with my team and like, what is something that I can do that's so far out there that's going to push me the extra mile? Mm-hmm. And now correspond that with probably a little bit of ads that you see. It's like the Calgary Marathon's happening in May. It's like, okay, I don't think I can do the half marathon. That's a little ambitious here. I hadn't walked in 12 years. But let's do the 10K. And I think the 10K resonated because when I did an internship, they were going around the office saying, hey, do you want to sign up for a 10K? We're raising money internally for the company. And that was the first time in my mind that I kind of came across that. So between those two things, I was like, let's sign up for the 10K.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you I had heard from you before the words delusional optimism, and I loved that phrase or those two words when you combine them together. When you first told me that you were going to walk the Calgary 10 kilometer, my first thought was he's turned delusional optimism into delusional ambition. Now, I thought about it some more afterwards, and to me, it just made perfect sense. I mean, your journey has been entirely incredible and remarkable, and now that you've started walking, obviously this is something that you're going to do because it's just another opportunity for you to continue to be remarkable. So that's kind of, again, at first I was like delusional ambition. I was like, no, this makes perfect sense. Obviously he's going to do this. I mean, it's just who he is and how he's built. So now that you've decided to do this, I understand that you're using this 10 kilometer that you're going to be walking as a platform to create some impact beyond just your own personal journey. So tell me about the cause that you're fundraising for and why it does resonate with you as much as it does.
So a big part of my journey is looking back and seeing who helped me along the way. Like as much as there was a lot of, personal effort, a lot of struggles along the way, without the people and support networks that I had, I would never got to where I am today. So a big turning point in my life was the Riddell Pain Clinic and meeting that doctor that was candid with me, that was willing to work with me and really push it. So part of this 10K was a personal challenge, but also was, let's look back a little bit on my journey and say who helped me the most and how can I give back a little bit. So I'm raising funds for the pain clinic to help other kids that were in my situation or have situations similar to mine that would be able to get great treatment and work through their struggles and hopefully overcome them and really push forward to the best life they can get.
Yeah. Now on that front, have you set a fundraising goal and how's that progress coming on that front?
For sure. So initially I said, okay, 10K for $10,000, a little bit of a marketing thing.
Makes sense.
Like, makes sense. Yeah. It's easy, has a ring to it. I was very fortunate that I hit that goal very quickly. I launched it on a Thursday night and roll around to the next Monday, we hit it. So I've extended that up to $20,000, and we're currently at this time just shy of 18.
Oh, wow. And we've got about 2 weeks left?
2.5 weeks.
2.5 weeks left. So still some time, obviously.
Absolutely.
And then you're going to have to go through that and then set another higher goal beyond 20,000 potentially.
I don't know where this is going to end up. No different than my medical journey.
Fair enough, yeah.
Work as hard as you can. Try to raise awareness as much as I can and show the important work that the Children's Hospital does. And then, see what happens.
See what happens. And so how, obviously this is a big challenge for you, walking 10 kilometers. Your first step, I believe, was just last October.
Correct, on Halloween.
Yeah, on Halloween, yeah. So how's the preparation been going for walking 10 kilometers?
So I would say that it was going super well. Yeah. And then recently I discovered I had some stress fractures within my left foot. Yeah. So I had to take a little bit of a pause on the traditional training and did a lot of cross training. So what that means is like swimming in a pool, builds up your cardio, that type of stuff, but has no impact on a joint. So for me, recovering from an obstacle that I didn't foresee and, saying, okay, how am I going to do this?
Yeah.
Like,
obviously nothing new to you. I mean,
nothing new
to you, right? Yeah.
So it's kind of just like let's get creative. Let's keep the mark on the wall that you're chasing, but maybe the path that you're, imagined is going to have to change and bend a little bit.
For sure. Now, just to shift gears a little bit, we talked about your journey. We've talked about this new challenge that you've set for yourself. Obviously, through this whole process, at the end of the day, you were still going through your formative years. You've been simultaneously building a future for yourself through education and haven't abandoned that in any way, shape, or form. What does that look like? Are you in studies? What are you studying for? What do you see a professional life looking like for you?
For sure. So I'm currently at the University of Calgary doing a dual major in finance and computer science. I have one more year and I graduate next April. Work-wise, I've been fortunate to have opportunities working on 2 different trade floors, mostly in natural gas and power trading. And, I really love that space. Back it up a little bit, having a childhood or adolescent time that it wasn't conventional because of being in a wheelchair. I was fortunate in a sense where, when other kids are in sports, I really took a keen interest in trading commodities. And I was fortunate that my parents would occasionally let me trade under their names. So from the age of 14, 15, that was a side passion for mine that I just moved into a career aspect. So what's next? I would say my main focus is medical, networking, and seeing what opportunities arise. And I personally would love to go work at a smaller shop where it engages me to my full potential and also pushes me into boundaries that I didn't know I had. So a small team that's willing to really engage me and try to push that outer limit.
So you've been doing some trading, and from our prior conversations, you've had exposure to real asset investments, portfolio type investments, and trading. What is it about just investing in general that kind of makes you tick or that attracts your engagement or your mental capacity?
I think that, it takes analysis. It takes understanding of all the pieces, and also humbling, because you're not always right, no matter how smart a person is. And it's always changing. And that'd be a big thing. So, yeah.
Is there anything from your journey of resilience that you think kind of has parallels or that are transferable skills into the world of investing?
I would say the number one thing I would say is you can have everything you want, but you just can't have it all at once. And what I mean by that is, it took me a good 3 years to get to doing this 10K. Yep. But really, in the last 3 months is when I gained everything. So when it comes to like the investing standpoint, I would say a lot of people have lofty goals of saying, I want X amount of money by X age. Most of it's retirement planning or whatever it may be for their own personal goals. And a lot of people can have that and achieve their goals, but they can't have it now. And that's the hardest, I think, frustrating part for a lot of things. Like, specifically me, is, if I could wave a wand and, hop on a ski hill tomorrow, I would. Yeah. But that's not the realistic outcome. So, understanding that, like I said, you can have everything that you want in life. You just can't have everything at once.
Right. So that at once kind of implies now. And so maybe we can't have everything we want now. Let's talk a little bit about the future. If you were to look out 5 to 10 years, what project the next 5 to 10 years for Rylan for me? What does that look like?
Sure. So, regain as much as I can physically by pushing the limit and just continuing on with that momentum. Mm-hmm. And then call it 10 years from now, I hope that I either am running my own trading shop or have my own company and working through that.
Yeah. Now, again, we've talked a lot about your journey. What message would you share with somebody else who's potentially beginning their own journey of transformation, whether it's coming up into a medical obstacle like you did, or even something, just an obstacle in life in general? What would you share with them if you had a chance to?
I would say you'd have to be delusionally optimistic. Mm-hmm. Anything, not to sound cliche, but anything worth achieving in life isn't going to come easy. And you have to go out. You're going to have days that you wish you could just skip. There's going to be times that you wake up and you don't really want to start your day, but you have to push through those. That might last for a month, 2 months, 6 months. But those are the times in life that really define who you are and how you can push through the next step. And now for me, like, I'm fortunate where any major obstacle that I've come across is kind of, how are we going to figure this out, right? And that's the mindset rather than, your world's falling apart. It's more of a, this is inconvenient or this sucks, but how do I figure this out?
Yeah.
Like, you accept it for what it is, mm-hmm. and then proceed.
Yeah. Challenges tend to clearly define themselves, and then it's up to us to kind of navigate towards the solution as opposed to focus on the problem at hand, right?
Yeah.
I think that's probably a pretty good note for us to start wrapping up on. I got to say, Rylan, from the moment that I met you, you've always been someone that I've enjoyed your company, but to understand a bit more about the story and the journey that you've been on, it's absolutely incredible. I've used the word remarkable. I'm inspired by your story, and I mean that completely with all genuine nature of my being. I'm thrilled that you've taken on this next step to do this challenge of the Calgary Marathon. I'm honestly honored. I haven't mentioned this yet, but you've asked me to walk with you, so I'm completely honored to be walking with you as part of this Calgary 10-kilometer marathon. And frankly, because you have that delusional optimism and you've translated into that delusional ambition, I'm just thrilled to see what's next for you. I can't wait.
Thank you.